for a slightly more dramatic start to this tale than a stupid petty argument with my boss's secretary over a stupid petty bit of office routine. I love my work, and I don't really hate Mondays. I hated this Monday morning, though, because I had a hangover. I'm not a heavy drinker. I know, that's what everybody says, but in my case, it's true. I make it a rule not to overindulge, in any fashion, on a work night. There were reasons, not good reasons, but reasons, why I had broken the rule that Sunday. They have no bearing on this story, and they are nobody's business but my own. Suffice it to say that I was late to work and not happy to be there. If I had been in my normal, sunny morning mood, I probably wouldn't have overreacted when I saw what Gerda had done. Gerda is, as I have mentioned, my boss's secretary, and my boss is Herr Dr. Anton Z. Schmidt, director of the National Museum in Munich. The National is small, but what there is Tschüss, to quote one of my favorite film characters. The building and the basic collections had been contributed to the city back in the 1800s by a Bavarian nobleman who was as eccentric as he was filthy rich, which is one of the reasons why our present collections are a bit unusual. For example, we have the most extensive collection of antique toys in Europe. We have a gem room, a medieval art section, and a costume room. The noble Graf von und zu Geffenstein also collected ladies' underwear, but we don't display that collection, fascinating as it is to students of costume. At least the people who request access to it say they are students of costume. The point of all this, in case you're wondering, is that our staff isn't large. Although Gerda has the title of secretary to the director, she types all our letters and takes care of most of the office work for the staff. No problem for Gerda. She is inhumanly efficient. She is also very nosy. Since I was late, I wasn't surprised to see that Gerda had taken advantage of my tardiness to mess around with my things. I wasn't surprised, but I was irate. If I had told her once, I had told her 100 times to leave my desk alone. Those heaps of debris are sacred to me. I know where everything is. If people start tidying up, I can't find anything. Gerda had stacked everything. She's a great stacker. Nice, neat piles, sorted by size instead of content, every corner squared. She had also replaced my desk blotter. The new one lay there, pristine and dead. Gone was the old one, with its vital store of information, telephone numbers, shopping lists, addresses of shops, and notes on books I wanted to read. And smack in the center of the nice new blotter was my mail. She had opened every letter and every parcel. The envelopes were stapled to the letters, which meant that in order to avoid tearing the latter, I would have to pry off the staples, breaking half my nails in the process. I kicked the nearest filing cabinet. Hopping and swearing, I went behind the screen that concealed the really important objects in my office, the sink and hot plate and coffee maker, and plugged in the last-named article. I fully intended to kill Gerda, but I figured I'd better have a cup of coffee first. Otherwise, I might stumble on the stairs and break a leg before I got my hands around her throat. While I drank my coffee, I glanced through the mail, but found nothing that improved my disposition, especially after I broke a nail prying off a staple. It was the usual assortment, notices of meetings, circulars from academic presses offering books nobody could afford on subjects nobody knew anything about, and letters from students asking permission to use the collections or to reproduce photographs. The stack of mail was pyramid style, with the largest items on the bottom. I worked my way grimly down to the base, a coarse brown envelope, approximately 8 by 10 inches in size. One of those well-known plain brown wrappers? It was plain enough. No sign of writing, not even my name. The heavy tape sealing the flap had been slashed, leaving edges so sharp I cut my finger when I reached into the envelope. Gerda's famous paper knife, honed to the keenness of a headsman's sword. One of these days, someone was going to stab her with that knife. It might be me. She hadn't stapled the enclosure to the envelope, probably because her diabolical tool couldn't penetrate the heavy cardboard on which the photograph was mounted. It was a black-and-white photo, probably enlarged from a snapshot. The faintly fuzzy focus suggested amateur photography. As I stared at it, a flash of memory rose and fell in the murky depths of my alcohol-fuzzed mind, but I couldn't get a grip on it. Yet I knew I'd seen a photograph like that before. The subject was a woman. The skin of her face had sagged, and her thin mouth was set in a straight, expressionless line. She could have been any aging hausfrau, except for her costume. A fringed diadem several inches wide encircled her brow. From it dangled ropes and chains of some metallic substance. Her earlobes were pulled down by more chains and dangles. The bodice of her plain dark dress was almost hidden by necklaces, row on row of them. I turned the photograph over. The back was plain gray cardboard, with no inscription or photographer's imprint. Why the hell had someone sent me a picture of his mother dressed up for an amateur theatrical performance? His mother, the soprano? She didn't resemble the conventional contralto stereotype. Her chin sagged with the weariness of age, and her features were pointed and meager, like those of a rain-soaked bird. But the gaudy fake jewelry suggested one of the more exotic operas, such as Lakme or Aida. I inspected the envelope again. It was still blank. Eventually, the caffeine penetrated my brain, and I gathered enough strength to pry myself off my chair. There was a pile of work waiting for me, but I decided that first I would go and kill Gerda. My office is at the top of one of the towers. There are 4 towers, one on each corner, plus battlements and machicolations and all the other accoutrements of 19th century pseudo-medievalism. The Graf was as loony as his king, Mad Ludwig of Bavaria, and both of them loved to build castles. It's fashionable to sneer at Ludwig's taste, and I admit he went overboard on the interior decor, all that writhing gilt, and those enormous Wagnerian paintings. But anyone who can contemplate unmoved the fairy-tale towers of Schloss Neuschwanstein, framed by the misty mountain-tops, hasn't got an ounce of romance in his or her soul. I chose my office in part because of the view. There are windows all around, looking out over the rooftops and towers of the city that I love like a native daughter. The twin green onion domes of the Frauenkirche, and the lacy stonework of the Rathaus Tower, the Isar winding gracefully between banks that are green in summer and snowy white in winter, and the bustling traffic of Karlsplatz, with the clock tower and the gates and the shops. You can keep your Parises and your Viennas. Give me Munich any day. It's one of the happiest, handsomest cities in the world. Another reason I chose to perch up in my airy was for purposes of privacy. There is no lift, and people who want to see me have to want to see me very badly before they will tackle 5 flights of stairs. Even Gerda doesn't do it often. I suppose the chance to pry during my absence had been too strong to resist. I keep telling myself that climbing stairs is good for the figure, but I must admit that I don't tackle them myself unless I want something rather badly. This morning, I wanted Gerda. The director's office is on the 2nd floor, but I had to go all the way down and then climb the central stairs, since the towers connect to the main building only on the 1st level. By the time I reached Gerda's room, I was full of adrenaline and pent-up rage. She'd been expecting me. I heard her typewriter start to rattle as I opened the door. She kept on typing, pretending she hadn't noticed me, even after I stepped across the room and